Coming back, I'm going to get straight to Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Zuhdi, you're one of my favorite people in the world. But this is very personal to you, and I understand that. You have family in Syria, and so it's not just an abstract thought. If we go into Syria, what do you believe we would accomplish?
Well, I'll tell you, I've served 11 years in the Navy, and I don't take it lightly to send our sons and daughters on things like this. But Syria is at a crossroads in the Middle East. Strategically, it's not just about a Syrian civil war. It's about our interest, appeasement of Iran versus containment of Iran. We are there's been a vacuum in the Middle East, and the do-nothing approach, Governor, has shown that Al-Qaeda, jihadists have been empowered. We have empowered Assad and Iran. There's been a vacuum there. We've allowed Saudi Arabia and Qatar to become the influencers of the future. And the narrative, Governor, is not just about Al-Qaeda versus Assad. The majority of Syrians, millions that have finally risen up in Damascus, where my family is, and Aleppo, where my other family and cousins are, these are millions that want to do neither of the fascisms of Islamism nor secular fascism of Assad. So we're basically, by saying that we don't want either side, we're ignoring the millions in Egypt that rose up against the military regime of Mubarak, and the millions that rose up against the Brotherhood. If we want to defeat Islamism and see the freedom agenda of President Bush continue to rise in the Middle East, who else? Is it a post-American world where we allow the Darwin doctrine of the most vicious to survive? I think it could be a limited operation like General Keane has called for, and in 2 or 3 weeks degrade their operations to where we give the opposition, yes, there's bad folks in the opposition, but the majority of the local coordination committees in Syria are regular Syrians that are pretty diverse.
Do we trust, though, that this administration would do what is necessary to make sure the operation was successful? And again, he's never defined what success looks like. Eric, that's the concern that I have. If he'd have gone in, as the general said 2 years ago, built an international coalition, taken the actions now, it could have been limited. I'm not sure it can be limited now based on the scope of what's going on.
Governor, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of potential for this to get out of control. And when we talk about Iran, if you want to weaken Iran, go to the head of the snake and weaken Iran. Target their nuclear weapons facilities. That's number one. Number two, with vacuums, and Zuhdi and I agree on most things. He's a good friend. When we talk about vacuums, if you look over the past few years at Iraq, Afghanistan, Egypt, Libya, when there is a power vacuum, it has been filled by Islamists. And my concern here is with a limited strike, Governor, and you're not putting boots on the ground. Okay, the chaos after Assad goes, who fills that vacuum? Is it Islamist? Is it, look, the most ruthless, most organized forces in Syria are the jihadists, Al-Qaeda and their ilk. Do they fill that vacuum? We've seen that happen in Afghanistan, Libya, and elsewhere, and there's a bad pattern here.
General, we keep hearing from Secretary Kerry and from the President himself there will be no boots on the ground. Is it realistic to say that we can go in, have a limited strike, basically go in, pop a few missiles, get out, and we're done? There's nothing else that's going to help, and that it won't stir up more than it solves, kind of like kicking a big mound of fire ants, I would liken it to.
No, I mean, stop and think about the fact that we have both Russians and Iranians inside Syria right now supporting Bashar al-Assad. What if we do hit one of their targets? I mean, this is a tinderbox, Governor. This could ignite a much larger conflict, which in fact would ultimately draw U.S. forces into this in a much deeper way. And to be very honest with you, I don't think that there is anybody in this administration that has a real appreciation for the dangers that we're dealing with here with this so-called limited strike.
Zuhdi, how possible would it be to build the coalition, which we don't have now? Basically, it's us, and France is offering to send a basket of wine and cheese and some baguettes, but that's about it. If we go it alone, there's no guarantee that we're going to be anything other than the scorn of the world and the scorn of the United Nations. Should we wait until there's a case made and a clear strategy?
No, because waiting has radicalized the Syrian population. There was virtually no Al-Qaeda in Syria except the ones in the prisons that Assad let out in order to give this narrative before 2012. The longer it goes on, the more radicalized, the less options Syrians have. So if you want a solution, I mean, look in Egypt, 60 years of iron-fisted dictatorship thrived and fueled the Brotherhood. 1 year of opening up society destroyed their political infrastructure, and the people rose up in the largest numbers. And the same thing can happen happen in Syria. If we have a vision to defeat Islamism, we as the promoters and the advocates for liberty around the world have to be the ones to give the majorities that room. And all it needs is some. This is very different than Iraq. In Syria, you have an uprising of the majority. 5 to 10 million Syrians are part of the movement to get rid of Assad. This is not just about 10,000 Al-Qaeda.
But Eric, if we go in and do something that stirs it up, do we not invite the Iranians then to go ahead and launch something against Israel to stir up the entire region, get everybody involved in a way that I don't know what that solves?
The Governor, I think a few things. I think, number one, that is a great possibility. I think if Assad, if his back is against the wall, does he go out in a blaze of glory? This is a guy who has the largest chemical, biological stockpile in the Middle East. Does he fire missiles at Israel and stir that hornet's nest, as you said? I think that's one factor. I think another factor here, post-Assad, does Syria become an Al-Qaeda magnet like we saw in Iraq? Again, that vacuum. It was filled in Iraq by Iran, by Al-Qaeda. My fear is we'll see that in Syria again. And in Egypt, look, yes, the Egyptian people did overthrow or lead to the overthrow of Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood regime, but look at all the damage done in that year, Governor, and now Egypt is in chaos, in disarray, thanks in large part to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, thanks all of you for being here, Dr. Jasser and Eric and General Boykin. Again, complicated issues, to say the least.